Directed by Rene, Perez, we are talking Bloodstorm. And this one stars David Kurzhal, who I believe is a kind of MMA style fighter. You've also got some Rene Perez regulars in here, Chase Bloomquist, Richard Tyson, Michael Paré. And how to describe this movie? I would say, in a nutshell, it's one part Con Air, one part Assault on Precinct 13, but in the woods. So this really focuses on two characters. David Kurzhal's character is a guy called Bennett, who is a professional assassin who has been captured by the police and is being transported to a kind of maximum security prison, which is kind of on a sort of island in the middle of like nowhere. And to help transport him, they have to go by boat, and the only person in the kind of the precinct that is qualified to operate this boat is actually this kind of desk jockey female policewoman who has really no field experience, but because she's the only one that's actually qualified to actually operate this boat, because she's a bit of a job's worth, she ends up kind of going on and helping these kind of, you know, sheriffs transport the prisoner. But when they get to this prison sort of island, there's no guards there, and it turns out that there has actually been a prison break, and all the inmates are now kind of all over this sort of countryside area, and the guards are killed outside of our female police detective, and she ends up teaming up with Bennett, this assassin who has kind of got somewhat of a strict moral code. And they sort of decide that they are mutually beneficial together and try to escape, take out these escaped prisoners. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So I've reviewed many Rene Perez movies, as you may know if you're a regular to this channel. In case you don't, he is an American or Mexican-American filmmaker who is very conservative. Many of his films have been have a kind of political angle. This one doesn't really, but there's one element that I'll kind of mention in a minute. But he does make a lot of kind of conservative leaning content. I actually quite enjoy his movies. They are very lowbrow. They are kind of somewhat samey, admittedly, but he has a lot of qualities that I kind of quite enjoy. The kind of over the top action, sometimes horror. Great cinematography, and you know, he has a knack for picking some good locations. So let's talk about this movie. What worked in it? It's a low budget movie. I quite like the Con Air concept. We have a good convict, so to speak, or at least somewhat of a convict with some moral scruples teaming up with this kind of inexperienced female police officer, and he knows that these convicts are just going to kind of rape her, so he sort of decides he's going to basically protect her in exchange for her helping him to escape afterwards. So it's kind of like a fun concept, and the guy who plays Bennett, as I say, is a trained professional MMA fighter, and he's actually got funny enough, he's got a big match actually not long after this movie is released in July of 2025. And him being a professional martial artist, the martial art fights here are pretty good. I can imagine he may well have done some of the choreography and stunt coordination here, I would have imagined. So yes, there's plenty of kind of like fist fights, martial arts and things like that in this movie, and they're effective. I think they seem quite kind of bone crunching and hard hitting, and it's nothing over the top. We're not talking extravagant wire work or anything like that, but it is kind of it's a little bit more than brawling. There is definitely sort of more martial arts and cinematic kind of style fight scenes, but nonetheless they're not over the top and seem, if you enjoy action movies, they are what you are going to expect, and there's quite a lot of them. Now, one thing I've mentioned is that Perez is a very much conservative-leaning filmmaker. And although he doesn't inject any overt politics here, one criticism that I've seen, you know, in film of modern kind of movies and stuff like that is the kind of the girl boss trope. And although we do have a female lead here, she is played to be more of an inexperienced rookie and is not a match physically for any of the kind of the convicts here. But she is portrayed to be a brave cop. You know, she wants to go out, and there's like a female nurse that is sort of needs rescuing. So she is brave. She's depicted to be a brave and courageous individual, but she simply is unable to physically overpower you know, these convicts. There is a couple of fight scenes here, and she's also somewhat inexperienced in field work. In actual fact, she's more of a hindrance at times to the Bennett character. For example, there's one sort of sequence where he's fighting someone and she tries to help him by throwing a rock at the convict that he's fighting, and ends up missing the convict and throwing this rock at Bennett's head, which knocked him unconscious, which causes problems. So she's kind of like not a particularly good asset on the field, despite the fact that she's actually very sort of courageous and stuff. So if you're not a fan of the girl boss trope, but you still want a proactive sort of likeable, you know, female lead, then I think this movie does sort of deliver that. You know, the movie is very much morals, black and white morals, if you see what I mean. Our character of Bennett, you know, he is a contracted killer, but he's got a heart of gold, that sort of thing. You know, it is very much good guys and bad guys. So we have like there's another assassin on this kind of prison island, and he's like obviously a psychopath. He collects all the badges of the policemen he's killed. So we've got very much like you know, extremes in the kind of the good guy and bad guy category. So if we just want a very uncomplicated sort of action sequence, and this movie is filled with action from start to finish, with a kind of a hint of as I say, Con Air and Assault from Precinct 13, then you know this movie might deliver that for you. As I've mentioned, I think Perez has an eye for cinematography. He does tend to use the same locations, and this kind of looks like it's the same here. But nonetheless, it's a great location, very, very sort of cinematic, this kind of this woodland area that he often uses. And one of the kind of the key things with Perez that he kind of, you know, his signature style is he likes shooting in quite kind of bright sort of sunlight and stuff, so everything is very kind of well lit, and there's lots of kind of like wide shots and things like that, so you kind of get a good angle of what's to be seen and stuff like that. And all our kind of convicts, they're all sort of, you know, big muscular guys, so it's all very much macho kind of action hero sort of stuff. So if you want an uncomplicated old school action film, then this might be the film for you. What doesn't work, one thing before I forget to say, because I will otherwise, is the sound effects here are amusing. They sound like they've just been taken from Street Fighter 2 and plonked on this movie. It's like the kicks and the stuff like that. You know, there's no like ambient noise in the background. It's just like and stuff like that. It's kind of comical. So the sound effects here are a little cheesy. Let me just get that out of the way first of all. The movie is obviously low budget, and it's kind of hiding the fact that it clearly can't afford to actually do this kind of prison break, so we never actually kind of see the prison or anything like that. It's all just kind of convicts in the woods, and you know, you've just got to accept that, okay, it seems like a somewhat of a flawed premise here to a degree. We don't know really how these convicts have escaped or anything like that, why there's really no backup, how they're just able to kind of get to this kind of area, and you know, whatever. You've just got to accept it. So yes, it's a low budget, uncomplicated action movie, but it might not be the most cerebral movie ever, you might just say. One critique that I have with Rene Perez films, and it's true of this one, is when we get shootout scenes, unfortunately there tends to be a decision here to have guys just standing out in the open, firing at each other until one gets hit. No, there's very few instances. There is a couple, but not many, where someone's like taking cover, or they're hiding behind a tree and kind of thinking more tactically. They're all just kind of standing out in the open, just shooting at each other. Inevitably, people get shot, and that's it. So the action sequences are mixed, because I quite like the fist fight scenes, but the shootout scenes are, if I'm honest with you, poorly staged. I mean, they're obviously using kind of blanks and stuff rather than kind of CGI muzzle flashes and stuff, but yeah, they're just the staging of these kind of shootouts. I mean, they're just not dynamic. It is just people standing static, shooting at each other, and then, you know, outside of being undynamic, it doesn't seem realistic, because people are just, you know, standing out with no cover. I'm not really too worried about getting shot, and then inevitably they do. So there it is. You know, it's pretty much that. The acting, again, you're watching a low-budget action film. I don't know really if you're expecting particularly strong acting. It isn't particularly strong. It's probably okay for a movie like this, but, you know, I'd be lying if I said this acting was stellar. It isn't. It's probably fine for a movie like this, but realistically, on the grand scheme of things, yeah, the acting isn't exactly Oscar-worthy, one might say. It isn't a particular kind of complicated plot. It's very, very simple, and maybe it gets a little samey, to be honest. It is just kind of like a very A to B storyline without any real twists in regards to plot elements. But you might like an uncomplicated action movie, and I say it does kind of have a somewhat old school feel to it. I have to say, despite some of the flaws, and I do like Perez, so maybe I'm a little biased with this one, I quite enjoyed this one. I have to say, if you are in the market for a low budget action movie, I've got to say I think this is a slightly above average one to me. It was just an uncomplicated, fun, enjoyable, old school beat 'em up, shoot 'em up. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? Would you see it based on what I've told you? Please do let me know your thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you next time.